Introduction to the Supreme Court's role. The Supreme Court of the United States, as the highest judicial authority in the country, plays a pivotal role in interpreting the Constitution. This responsibility is fundamental to its function within the American governmental system. As the final arbiter of constitutional questions, the Supreme Court's decisions significantly shape the nation's legal landscape and impact every aspect of American life. A. The Constitution as the supreme law of the land. The U.S. Constitution, adopted in 1787, is the supreme law of the land. It establishes the framework for government operations and delineates the rights and liberties of individuals. The Constitution's authority is rooted in its role as the foundational document that outlines the structure and powers of the federal government, the relationship between federal and state governments, and the rights of citizens. The Constitution is designed to be a living document, able to guide the nation through various historical and social changes. Its provisions are broad and flexible, allowing it to be applied to a wide range of issues. However, this flexibility also necessitates careful interpretation to ensure that its principles are upheld in the face of evolving societal norms and challenges. B. The necessity of constitutional interpretation. The Constitution was crafted with the foresight that it would need to be interpreted over time. Its framers understood that societal changes, technological advancements, and new legal challenges would require a nuanced application of its principles. As such, the Supreme Court's role in interpreting the Constitution is essential for maintaining the relevance and effectiveness of the document. Interpreting the Constitution involves understanding its text, context, and the intent of its framers, as well as applying these interpretations to contemporary issues. This process ensures that the Constitution continues to serve as a living framework for governance and justice. For example, issues such as digital privacy, same-sex marriage, and healthcare have all required the court to interpret constitutional principles in ways that the framers could not have anticipated. The Supreme Court's interpretations can have profound effects on American law and society. Decisions made by the court can either affirm or alter existing legal standards, impacting everything from individual rights to governmental powers. For instance, the court's interpretation of the Equal Protection Clause in Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, led to the desegregation of public schools, marking a significant shift in civil rights and social justice. C. The court's role in shaping legal precedents. In its role as the interpreter of the Constitution, the Supreme Court establishes legal precedents that guide lower courts and influence future cases. The principle of stare decisis, which means to stand by things decided, is central to this process. By adhering to precedents, the court provides stability and consistency in the law. However, it can also overturn precedents when deemed necessary, reflecting changes in societal values or recognizing previous errors in legal reasoning. The court's decisions not only resolve individual cases, but also set legal standards that affect broad aspects of American life. For example, decisions on voting rights, free speech, and executive power shape the boundaries within which both the government and citizens operate. As such, the Supreme Court's interpretations are crucial for maintaining the balance of power and protecting individual liberties. D. Balancing historical context and modern values. The challenge for the Supreme Court is to balance the historical context of the Constitution with modern values and societal needs. The court must navigate between maintaining fidelity to the text and adapting its principles to address contemporary issues. This balance is essential for ensuring that the Constitution remains a relevant and effective framework for governance. In summary, the Supreme Court's role in interpreting the Constitution is fundamental to its function as the highest court in the land. Its decisions shape American law and influence every facet of the nation's legal and social landscape. By interpreting the Constitution, the court ensures that the principles on which the United States was founded continue to guide the nation through its evolving challenges. Judicial Review and Marbury v. Madison, 1803. Judicial review is a cornerstone of the American legal system, granting the Supreme Court the authority to review and potentially invalidate laws and government actions that are deemed unconstitutional. This principle was established by the landmark case Marbury v. Madison in 1803, which remains one of the most significant decisions in the history of the Supreme Court. Understanding this case is crucial for comprehending the court's role in interpreting the Constitution and maintaining the balance of power among the branches of government. A. The background of Marbury v. Madison. The case of Marbury v. Madison arose during a period of intense political conflict. In the early 1800s, President John Adams, a Federalist, appointed several judges to federal positions in the last days of his presidency, a move intended to solidify Federalist influence in the judiciary. These appointments, known as the Midnight Judges, were confirmed by the Senate, but not all of the commissions were delivered before Adams left office. When Thomas Jefferson, a Democratic Republican, became president, he ordered his Secretary of State, James Madison, not to deliver the remaining commissions. One of the appointees, William Marbury, who had been nominated as a Justice of the Peace, petitioned the Supreme Court to compel Madison to deliver his commission. Marbury argued that he had a right to the commission and sought a writ of mandamus, a judicial order requiring a government official to perform a duty. B. Chief Justice John Marshall's decision. The Supreme Court, under Chief Justice John Marshall, faced a complex legal and political dilemma. The central issue was whether Marbury had a right to the commission and whether the court had the authority to enforce it. Marshall's decision was both a pragmatic and profound one that would establish the foundation of judicial review. Marshall concluded that Marbury had a right to the commission, as the appointment was legal and complete once confirmed by the Senate. However, he found that the Supreme Court did not have the authority to issue a writ of mandamus in this case. This was because the section of the Judiciary Act of 1789 that granted the court such authority was unconstitutional. Marshall ruled that Congress had exceeded its constitutional authority by expanding the court's original jurisdiction beyond what the Constitution permitted. C. The principle of judicial review. Marshall's ruling in Marbury v. Madison established the principle of judicial review, which allows the Supreme Court to invalidate laws and executive actions that conflict with the Constitution. This principle is essential for maintaining the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. Judicial review ensures that all branches of government, legislative, executive, and judicial, operate within the bounds set by the Constitution. By asserting the power of judicial review, Marshall reinforced the role of the judiciary as a check on the other branches of government. This decision ensured that the Constitution would remain a living document, with the Supreme Court serving as the final interpreter of its meaning. The court's ability to review and nullify unconstitutional laws is a critical mechanism for safeguarding individual rights and preventing abuses of power. D. Impact and legacy. The legacy of Marbury v. Madison extends beyond its immediate legal context. It established a precedent that has been pivotal in shaping the role of the Supreme Court and its interactions with the other branches of government. The case demonstrated the judiciary's capacity to act as a check on legislative and executive power, reinforcing the system of checks and balances integral to American democracy. Over the years, judicial review has been used in numerous cases to uphold or invalidate laws and government actions. It has played a key role in addressing issues such as civil rights, federalism, and the limits of executive power. The principle established in Marbury v. Madison continues to be a fundamental aspect of constitutional law, ensuring that the Constitution remains a vital and enforceable safeguard against overreach and injustice. In summary, Marbury v. Madison was a landmark case that established the principle of judicial review, defining the Supreme Court's role in interpreting the Constitution. Chief Justice John Marshall's decision affirmed the court's authority to review and invalidate unconstitutional actions, thereby shaping the trajectory of American constitutional law and reinforcing the framework of checks and balances in the U.S. government. Interpreting the Constitution, Originalism and Living Constitution. The interpretation of the U.S. Constitution is a fundamental aspect of the Supreme Court's role, and various theories have emerged to guide how this interpretation should be approached. Two of the most prominent theories are originalism and the living Constitution. Each theory offers a different perspective on how the Constitution should be understood and applied, influencing the court's decisions and the development of constitutional law. A. Originalism. Originalism is a theory of constitutional interpretation that asserts that the Constitution should be understood and applied based on its original meaning at the time it was drafted and ratified. This approach emphasizes the intentions and understandings of the Constitution's framers and seeks to adhere strictly to the text and historical context of the document. Originalists argue that this method preserves the rule of law and ensures that judicial decisions are grounded in the democratic process. By focusing on the original meaning, originalism aims to limit judicial discretion and avoid the imposition of contemporary values or personal preferences on the Constitution. This approach often involves examining historical documents, debates from the Constitutional Convention, and other sources to ascertain the framers' intent. For instance, in cases like District of Columbia v. Heller, 2008, originalist interpretations played a significant role. The Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, interpreted the Second Amendment's right to bear arms based on the historical context and understanding at the time of its adoption. This decision affirmed an individual's right to possess firearms for self-defense, reflecting an originalist view of the Constitution's text. B. The living Constitution. In contrast, the living Constitution approach posits that the Constitution's interpretation should evolve over time to reflect contemporary values, societal changes, and new circumstances. Proponents of this theory argue that the Constitution's broad and flexible language was intentionally designed to adapt to an evolving society, and its application should consider modern contexts and challenges. The living Constitution perspective emphasizes that the framers could not have anticipated all future developments, so the Constitution must be interpreted in a way that remains relevant and responsive to current issues. This approach often involves looking at the broader principles and values enshrined in the Constitution, such as liberty, equality, and justice, and applying them in a way that addresses contemporary problems. A notable example of the living Constitution approach is the decision in Obergefell v. Hodges, 2015. The Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution guarantees same-sex couples the right to marry, interpreting the due process and equal protection clauses of the 14th Amendment in light of contemporary understandings of marriage and equality. This decision reflected an evolving interpretation of the Constitution in response to changing social attitudes. C. Tensions between originalism and the living Constitution. The debate between originalism and the living Constitution often centers on the balance between judicial restraint and activism. Originalism advocates argue that adherence to the original meaning maintains legal stability and respects the democratic process of constitutional amendment. Conversely, proponents of the living Constitution believe that flexible interpretation is necessary to ensure that constitutional principles remain relevant and effective in addressing modern issues. This tension manifests in various Supreme Court decisions, where justices may adopt different interpretive approaches based on their judicial philosophies. The choice between originalism and a living Constitution approach can influence the outcomes of cases and shape the trajectory of constitutional law. D. Impact on constitutional law and society. Both interpretive approaches have significant implications for constitutional law and society. Originalism can provide a sense of continuity and predictability, ensuring that changes in constitutional interpretation reflect the original intent of the framers. The living constitution approach, on the other hand, allows for adaptability and responsiveness to societal changes, ensuring that the Constitution remains a relevant and dynamic framework for governance. In summary, originalism and the living Constitution represent two distinct approaches to interpreting the U.S. Constitution. Originalism emphasizes adherence to the document's original meaning and historical context, while the living Constitution approach advocates for an evolving interpretation that reflects contemporary values and circumstances. The Supreme Court's decisions, guided by these interpretive theories, shape the development of constitutional law and impact American society. Precedent and stare decisis. Precedent and the principle of stare decisis are central to the functioning of the U.S. legal system and the Supreme Court's role in interpreting the Constitution. These concepts ensure stability and consistency in the law by guiding judicial decisions based on previous rulings. Understanding how precedent operates and the conditions under which it may be overturned provides insight into the court's decision-making process and its impact on American jurisprudence. A. Precedent and stare decisis. Precedent refers to past judicial decisions that guide subsequent cases involving similar issues. The principle of stare decisis, which means to stand by things decided, is the doctrine that courts should adhere to established precedents when deciding new cases. This principle promotes legal stability and predictability by ensuring that similar cases are resolved in a consistent manner. Stare decisis provides several key benefits. First, it helps create a coherent and stable legal system by ensuring that the law develops in a predictable manner. This predictability allows individuals and institutions to plan their actions and understand the legal consequences of their behavior. Second, it reinforces the legitimacy of the judiciary by respecting the continuity of legal reasoning and honoring the work of previous courts. In practice, when the Supreme Court makes a decision on a legal issue, that decision sets a precedent that lower courts are generally expected to follow. For example, in Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, the Supreme Court's decision to overturn the doctrine of separate but equal established a precedent that guided future cases involving civil rights and racial equality. B. Overturning precedent. While the principle of stare decisis promotes legal stability, the Supreme Court has the authority to overturn precedent if it finds that a previous decision was incorrect or no longer aligns with contemporary values and understanding. Overruling precedent is relatively rare and typically occurs only when a court believes that the previous ruling was fundamentally flawed or that societal changes warrant a reevaluation of established legal principles. The decision to overturn precedent involves a careful and deliberate process. The court may consider factors such as the impact of the previous decision on the legal system, changes in societal attitudes, and whether the precedent has proven to be unworkable or unjust. Overruling precedent is often accompanied by a detailed explanation, demonstrating the court's reasoning and ensuring that the decision is grounded in legal principles. A notable example of the court overturning precedent is the decision in Roe v. Wade, 1973, which established a woman's right to choose an abortion. This decision was later challenged in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, 2022, where the court overturned Roe v. Wade, citing the need to return the issue of abortion regulation to the states. This shift reflected a significant change in the court's interpretation of constitutional principles and demonstrated the complex dynamics of adhering to or departing from precedent. C. The role of precedent in constitutional interpretation. Precedent plays a crucial role in the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution. By adhering to previous decisions, the court maintains a consistent application of constitutional principles and ensures that changes in the law occur through a considered and deliberate process. This adherence to precedent helps preserve the integrity of constitutional interpretation and supports the principle of legal stability. However, the court's ability to overturn precedent also highlights the dynamic nature of constitutional interpretation. While precedent provides a foundation for legal reasoning, the court must be open to reassessing past decisions in light of evolving legal and societal contexts. This balance between stability and adaptability is essential for ensuring that constitutional law remains relevant and responsive to contemporary issues. D. Impact on the legal system. The interplay between precedent and the potential for overturning it has a significant impact on the legal system. Adherence to precedent fosters consistency and reliability in the law, which is vital for maintaining public trust in the judiciary. At the same time, the ability to overturn precedent allows the court to correct past errors and address issues that may have been overlooked or misinterpreted. In summary, precedent and stare decisis are fundamental principles in the Supreme Court's role in interpreting the Constitution. They ensure stability and consistency in the law while allowing for the possibility of change when necessary. The court's decisions to adhere to or overturn precedent reflect the ongoing dialogue between maintaining legal continuity and adapting to evolving societal values and legal understandings. Judicial activism versus judicial restraint. The concepts of judicial activism and judicial restraint represent two opposing philosophies regarding the role of the judiciary, particularly the Supreme Court, in interpreting the Constitution and shaping public policy. These philosophies reflect differing views on the appropriate extent of judicial involvement in matters typically handled by the legislative and executive branches of government. A. Judicial activism. Judicial activism is a philosophy that advocates for an active role of the judiciary in addressing societal issues and advancing justice. Proponents of judicial activism believe that courts should not only interpret the law but also take an active role in shaping policy and addressing injustices when the other branches of government fail to act. This approach often involves the judiciary stepping in to rectify perceived failures in legislative or executive actions. Supporters of judicial activism argue that the courts have a duty to protect individual rights and promote social change, especially when legislative or executive branches are unwilling or unable to address critical issues. Activist judges are seen as champions of justice who use their judicial power to address systemic inequalities and uphold constitutional principles in dynamic and evolving contexts. A prominent example of judicial activism is the decision in Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. In this landmark case, the Supreme Court overturned the doctrine of separate but equal, established by Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896, which had permitted racial segregation in public schools. The court's decision was driven by a recognition of the inherent inequality in segregation and a commitment to advancing civil rights, demonstrating the judiciary's role in addressing profound social issues. B. Judicial restraint. In contrast, judicial restraint is a philosophy that emphasizes the need for courts to exercise caution and avoid overstepping their bounds. Advocates of judicial restraint argue that the judiciary should defer to the legislative and executive branches when interpreting the Constitution and making policy decisions. According to this view, the primary role of judges is to interpret and apply the law based on its text and established precedents, rather than making broad, transformative decisions. Proponents of judicial restraint contend that courts should avoid intervening in policy matters that are better addressed by elected representatives. This approach is grounded in the belief that democratic processes and elected officials are better suited to address complex social and political issues. Judicial restraint aims to respect the separation of powers and maintain the balance between the branches of government. An example of judicial restraint can be seen in the Supreme Court's handling of cases involving controversial social issues, where the court has chosen not to intervene. For instance, in cases involving abortion regulations, some justices have advocated for deference to state legislatures and the democratic process, rather than imposing nationwide standards. C. The balance between activism and restraint. The tension between judicial activism and judicial restraint reflects a broader debate about the appropriate role of the judiciary in a democratic society. Balancing these approaches involves navigating the delicate interplay between protecting constitutional rights and respecting the separation of powers among branches of government. Judicial activism and restraint are not mutually exclusive, but rather represent a spectrum of judicial philosophies. Judges may adopt different approaches depending on the specific legal and factual contexts of cases before them. The choice between activism and restraint often depends on factors such as the nature of the constitutional issues at stake, the clarity of existing precedents, and the broader societal impact of judicial decisions. D. Impact on constitutional law and society. The philosophies of judicial activism and restraint have significant implications for constitutional law and society. Activist decisions can lead to significant legal and social changes, influencing public policy and advancing civil rights. However, they can also provoke criticism and debate about judicial overreach and the appropriate scope of judicial authority. Judicial restraint, on the other hand, reinforces the idea that courts should limit their role to interpreting the law and respecting the democratic process. This approach can help maintain stability and predictability in the legal system, but may also result in missed opportunities for addressing pressing social issues. In summary, judicial activism and judicial restraint represent two contrasting approaches to the role of the judiciary in interpreting the Constitution and shaping public policy. While activism emphasizes the judiciary's role in advancing justice and addressing societal issues, restraint advocates for a cautious approach that respects the separation of powers and defers to elected representatives. The balance between these philosophies influences the development of constitutional law and the impact of judicial decisions on American society. Key cases and constitutional interpretation. Key Supreme Court cases have significantly shaped the interpretation of the Constitution, influencing American law and society. These landmark decisions often reflect broader changes in societal values and the evolving understanding of constitutional principles. By examining notable cases, we can gain insight into how the Supreme Court interprets the Constitution and addresses pivotal issues in American life. A. Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. The case of Brown v. Board of Education marked a pivotal moment in the history of civil rights in the United States. The Supreme Court unanimously ruled that racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional, overturning the previous doctrine established by Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896, which had permitted separate but equal facilities. The Brown decision was grounded in the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, which guarantees that no state shall deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The court found that segregation in public schools was inherently unequal and violated this constitutional guarantee. Chief Justice Earl Warren, writing for the court, emphasized that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal, thus directly challenging and dismantling institutionalized segregation. The impact of Brown v. Board of Education extended beyond education, catalyzing the broader civil rights movement and leading to significant changes in other areas of public life. The decision underscored the court's role in advancing civil rights and enforcing constitutional principles in the face of long-standing social injustices. B. Roe v. Wade, 1973. Another landmark case, Roe v. Wade, addressed the constitutional right to privacy and its implications for abortion. The Supreme Court ruled that the right to privacy, although not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, was implied by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. This right encompassed a woman's decision to terminate her pregnancy. The court's decision in Roe v. Wade established that state laws prohibiting abortion were unconstitutional during the first trimester of pregnancy. The ruling sought to balance the rights of a woman to make decisions about her body with the state's interests in regulating abortion. Justice Harry Blackmun, writing for the majority, argued that the right to privacy was broad enough to encompass a woman's decision whether or not to terminate her pregnancy. The decision was highly controversial and sparked ongoing debates about reproductive rights and privacy. Despite subsequent legal challenges and attempts to limit its scope, Roe v. Wade remains a cornerstone of discussions on reproductive rights and constitutional privacy. C. Obergefell v. Hodges, 2015. The decision in Obergefell v. Hodges was a landmark moment in the fight for marriage equality. The Supreme Court ruled that same-sex marriage was a constitutional right under the 14th Amendment's Due Process and Equal Protection Clauses. The ruling effectively legalized same-sex marriage across the United States, overturning state bans and recognizing marriage equality as a fundamental right. Justice Anthony Kennedy, writing for the majority, emphasized that marriage is a fundamental right inherent in the liberty of the person, and that denying same-sex couples the right to marry violated the principles of equality and dignity. The court's decision in Obergefell reflected a significant shift in societal attitudes toward LGBTQ+ rights and demonstrated the judiciary's role in addressing evolving social norms. The ruling had a profound impact on American society, affirming the equal dignity of same-sex couples and marking a significant advancement in the recognition of LGBTQ+ rights. D. The broader impact of key cases. These key cases illustrate the Supreme Court's role in interpreting the Constitution and addressing critical issues in American society. By examining how the court has tackled issues such as segregation, reproductive rights, and marriage equality, we gain insight into its approach to constitutional interpretation and its impact on the legal and social landscape. The decisions in Brown v. Board of Education, Roe v. Wade, and Obergefell v. Hodges demonstrate the court's ability to shape societal norms and advance constitutional principles. Each case reflects the court's engagement with contemporary issues and its role in interpreting the Constitution in light of evolving values and understandings. In summary, key Supreme Court cases have played a crucial role in shaping the interpretation of the Constitution and addressing significant legal and social issues. Through its rulings, the court has influenced American law and society, reflecting broader changes in values and contributing to the ongoing evolution of constitutional principles. Checks and balances. The concept of checks and balances is a fundamental principle of the U.S. Constitution, designed to ensure that no single branch of government, executive, legislative, or judicial, gains too much power. This system of checks and balances is essential for maintaining the balance of power among the branches and safeguarding democratic governance. The Supreme Court plays a crucial role in this system, exercising judicial review and providing a check on the actions of the legislative and executive branches. A. The Supreme Court's role in checks and balances. The Supreme Court's primary role in the system of checks and balances is to act as a check on the legislative and executive branches through the exercise of judicial review. This power, established by the landmark case Marbury v. Madison, 1803, allows the court to review and invalidate laws and executive actions that are inconsistent with the Constitution. By exercising judicial review, the court ensures that both Congress and the President operate within the limits set by the Constitution. For example, when Congress passes a law, the Supreme Court has the authority to assess whether the law complies with constitutional requirements. If the court finds that a law violates constitutional principles, it can strike it down, effectively preventing the law from being enforced. Similarly, the court can review executive actions, such as presidential orders, to determine whether they are consistent with the Constitution and statutory laws. B. The president's role in appointing justices. The president has a significant role in the checks and balances system through the appointment of Supreme Court justices. The president nominates individuals to fill vacancies on the court, and these nominations must be confirmed by the Senate. This process ensures that the executive branch does not have unilateral control over the judiciary and that judicial appointments reflect a broader consensus. The appointment process involves several steps. The president selects a nominee. The Senate Judiciary Committee holds hearings to evaluate the nominee's qualifications and views, and the full Senate votes to confirm or reject the nomination. This process allows for a thorough examination of the nominee's judicial philosophy and ensures that the appointment reflects the principles of representative democracy. C. The Senate's role in confirming nominations. The Senate plays a crucial role in the system of checks and balances by providing advice and consent on judicial nominations. This role is outlined in Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, which requires the Senate to confirm the president's judicial nominees. The Senate's role ensures that judicial appointments are subject to scrutiny and reflection of the will of the people, as senators represent the interests of their constituents. Senate confirmation hearings are a key aspect of this process. During these hearings, senators question nominees about their qualifications, judicial philosophy, and views on important legal issues. The confirmation process allows senators to assess whether a nominee will uphold constitutional principles and contribute to the integrity of the judiciary. D. Congressional and presidential responses to court decisions. The system of checks and balances also involves reactions and responses to Supreme Court decisions. When the court issues a ruling that Congress or the president disagrees with, they may seek to address the decision through legislative or executive action. For example, Congress may pass new laws or amend existing ones to address the court's interpretation of constitutional principles. Similarly, the president may issue executive orders or take other actions to respond to the court's rulings. While Congress and the president can respond to court decisions, they must operate within the bounds of the Constitution. Any legislative or executive action must still comply with constitutional requirements and cannot override the court's interpretation of constitutional principles. This interplay between the branches of government highlights the dynamic nature of the checks and balances system and the ongoing dialogue between different branches of government. E. The importance of checks and balances. The system of checks and balances is vital for preserving democratic governance and preventing the concentration of power. By ensuring that each branch of government can check the actions of the others, the system promotes accountability and transparency. The Supreme Court's role in exercising judicial review, coupled with the president's appointment power and the Senate's confirmation process, helps maintain a balanced and effective government. In summary, the concept of checks and balances is a cornerstone of the U.S. Constitution, designed to prevent any single branch of government from becoming too powerful. The Supreme Court plays a crucial role in this system by exercising judicial review and ensuring that legislative and executive actions comply with constitutional principles. The interplay between the branches of government, including the president's appointment power, the Senate's confirmation role, and responses to court decisions, highlights the dynamic nature of American democracy and the ongoing effort to maintain a balanced and accountable government. Public perception and legitimacy. The legitimacy of the Supreme Court is crucial for maintaining the integrity and effectiveness of the U.S. judiciary. The court's authority and its ability to influence American law and society depend significantly on public perception and trust. The relationship between the court's decisions and public opinion is complex, and the court's perceived legitimacy can impact its effectiveness in upholding constitutional principles and delivering justice. A. The role of public perception. Public perception plays a significant role in the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. The court's authority derives not only from its constitutional role but also from the public's respect for its decisions and its perceived impartiality. When the court is viewed as fair, unbiased, and committed to upholding the Constitution, its decisions are more likely to be accepted and respected by the public. Conversely, when the court's decisions are perceived as politically motivated or disconnected from societal values, its legitimacy can be questioned. Public opinion can influence how the court's decisions are received and implemented. For example, if the public perceives a decision as unjust or contrary to widely held values, it may lead to public protests, calls for legislative changes, or challenges to the court's authority. B. Impact of controversial decisions. Controversial decisions can significantly impact the court's legitimacy. High-profile cases that address contentious issues, such as abortion, same-sex marriage, or voting rights, often provoke strong reactions from various segments of society. When the court makes a decision on a divisive issue, it can lead to polarization and debates about the court's role and authority. For instance, the decision in Roe v. Wade, 1973, on abortion rights was highly controversial and sparked ongoing debates about reproductive rights and judicial activism. Similarly, Bush v. Gore, 2000, which decided the outcome of the presidential election, faced criticism for its perceived impact on the electoral process and judicial impartiality. These decisions illustrate how the court's rulings on contentious issues can affect public perception and the court's legitimacy. C. Measures to maintain legitimacy. To maintain its legitimacy, the Supreme Court must strive to demonstrate impartiality, adhere to constitutional principles, and engage in transparent decision-making. The court's commitment to legal reasoning and adherence to established precedents helps reinforce its role as an impartial arbiter of constitutional issues. Moreover, the court's decisions should be grounded in careful legal analysis and respect for constitutional principles, rather than political considerations. By focusing on legal reasoning and upholding the Constitution, the court can help foster public trust and confidence in its decisions. The court also benefits from its role as a check on the other branches of government, which reinforces its position as an independent and essential part of the constitutional system. This independence helps ensure that the court can make decisions based on legal principles rather than external pressures or political influence. D. The role of public engagement. Public engagement and education about the court's role and decisions can also contribute to its legitimacy. By increasing public understanding of the judiciary's functions and the principles underlying its decisions, the court can help foster greater respect and acceptance of its rulings. Educational initiatives and outreach efforts that explain the court's role in interpreting the Constitution and the reasons behind its decisions can help demystify the judicial process and promote a more informed public. This understanding can lead to greater acceptance of the court's authority and reduce misconceptions or criticisms based on incomplete information. E. The balance between independence and accountability. Maintaining the court's legitimacy involves balancing its independence with accountability. While the court must be free from political pressures to make impartial decisions, it also needs to be accountable to the public and responsive to societal changes. This balance is crucial for ensuring that the court remains an effective and respected institution within the broader framework of American democracy. In summary, public perception and legitimacy are vital to the Supreme Court's role in interpreting the Constitution and shaping American law. The court's authority relies on public trust in its impartiality and commitment to constitutional principles. Controversial decisions, measures to maintain legitimacy, public engagement, and the balance between independence and accountability all contribute to the court's effectiveness and its role in upholding the rule of law. By addressing these factors, the Supreme Court can continue to serve as a cornerstone of American democracy and constitutional governance. The foundation of constitutional interpretation. A. The Constitution as the supreme law of the land. The Constitution of the United States stands as the supreme law of the land, a foundational document that establishes the structure of the federal government and delineates the rights and responsibilities of its citizens. Ratified in 1787 and effective from 1789, it serves as the ultimate authority in American legal and political life. This supremacy is enshrined in Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution, often referred to as the Supremacy Clause, which declares that the Constitution, along with federal laws and treaties, constitutes the supreme law of the land. This clause ensures that state laws and constitutions must conform to the federal Constitution, reinforcing its primacy in the American legal system. The Constitution's role as the supreme law underscores its significance in governing the nation. It provides the framework for the operation of the federal government, outlining the powers of the legislative, executive, and judicial branches and establishing checks and balances to prevent the concentration of power. Additionally, the Constitution guarantees fundamental rights and liberties to individuals, such as freedom of speech, religion, and due process under the law. These provisions reflect the principles of democracy and justice that underpin the American political system. Despite its foundational role, the Constitution is not a static document. It is a product of its time, written in the late 18th century, and designed to provide a broad framework for governance rather than an exhaustive set of detailed laws. This inherent flexibility allows the Constitution to adapt to changing circumstances and evolving societal values. The Supreme Court, as the highest judicial authority in the country, plays a crucial role in interpreting the Constitution and ensuring that its principles are applied in contemporary contexts. B. The necessity of interpreting the Constitution to address contemporary issues. The necessity of interpreting the Constitution arises from the need to apply its principles to a rapidly changing world. As society evolves, new issues and challenges emerge that the framers of the Constitution could not have anticipated. The process of constitutional interpretation allows the Supreme Court to address these contemporary issues and ensure that the Constitution remains a relevant and effective guide for governance. One key aspect of interpreting the Constitution is dealing with ambiguities and gaps in its text. The Constitution provides broad principles and general guidelines, but it does not offer specific solutions for every conceivable legal or societal issue. For example, the Constitution guarantees the right to free speech, but does not specify the limits or applications of this right in the context of modern technology, such as the Internet and social media. Interpreting the Constitution in light of contemporary issues helps clarify how its provisions should be applied in today's context. Additionally, societal values and norms change over time, and the Constitution must be interpreted in a way that reflects these changes. For instance, issues related to civil rights, such as racial equality and gender equality, have evolved significantly since the Constitution's ratification. Landmark decisions like Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, and Obergefell v. Hodges, 2015, demonstrate how the Supreme Court has interpreted the Constitution to address evolving understandings of equality and justice. The interpretation of the Constitution also involves balancing the need for stability with the need for adaptability. While maintaining consistency with established precedents is important for legal stability, the court must also be willing to adapt its interpretations to address new issues and reflect contemporary values. This balance ensures that the Constitution remains a living document that can respond to the needs of a dynamic society while preserving the core principles that underpin American democracy. Furthermore, the process of constitutional interpretation often involves considering the broader impact of judicial decisions on society. The court must weigh the implications of its rulings on individuals, institutions, and public policy. This responsibility underscores the importance of thoughtful and principled interpretation that aligns with constitutional values while addressing contemporary challenges. In conclusion, the Constitution's role as the supreme law of the land establishes its central place in American governance and legal theory. The necessity of interpreting the Constitution arises from the need to apply its principles to contemporary issues and evolving societal values. Through the process of interpretation, the Supreme Court ensures that the Constitution remains a relevant and effective guide for governance, balancing the need for stability with adaptability to address the challenges of a changing world. Conclusion. The Supreme Court of the United States holds a pivotal role in the interpretation of the Constitution, shaping the nation's legal and social landscape. As the highest court in the land, its decisions not only resolve specific legal disputes, but also establish precedents that influence the trajectory of American law and society. Understanding the court's role involves recognizing the delicate balance it maintains between adhering to established principles and responding to evolving societal values. A. The role of constitutional interpretation. The Constitution serves as the foundation of U.S. law, establishing the framework for government operations and protecting individual rights. The Supreme Court's role in interpreting this document is essential for ensuring that its principles remain relevant and effective in addressing contemporary issues. Through judicial review, the court assesses whether laws and government actions align with constitutional requirements, thus safeguarding the integrity of the Constitution and ensuring that democratic principles are upheld. The court's interpretations of the Constitution can have profound and far-reaching effects on American society. Landmark decisions, such as those in Brown v. Board of Education, Roe v. Wade, and Obergefell v. Hodges, have not only resolved legal disputes, but have also driven significant social change. These decisions illustrate the court's ability to influence public policy and advance constitutional values, demonstrating the dynamic nature of constitutional interpretation. B. The balance between precedent and innovation. The principle of stare decisis ensures that the Supreme Court adheres to established precedents, providing stability and continuity in the legal system. By respecting previous decisions, the court helps maintain a consistent application of the law, which is crucial for ensuring predictability and reliability in the legal system. However, the court also has the authority to overturn precedent when it deems necessary, reflecting changes in societal values and understanding. The balance between adhering to precedent and embracing legal innovation is a defining feature of the court's role. While precedent provides a foundation for legal reasoning, the court must be willing to adapt its interpretations to reflect evolving societal norms and address new challenges. This balance ensures that constitutional law remains responsive to contemporary issues while preserving legal stability. C. The impact of judicial philosophy. Judicial philosophies, such as judicial activism and judicial restraint, shape the court's approach to constitutional interpretation. Judicial activism involves an active role in addressing societal issues and advancing justice, while judicial restraint emphasizes deference to elected branches and a cautious approach to constitutional interpretation. The interplay between these philosophies influences how the court approaches cases and resolves legal disputes. The court's decisions are often influenced by the prevailing judicial philosophy of its justices, which can vary based on their interpretive approaches and personal views. This diversity of perspectives contributes to the court's dynamic nature and its ability to address a wide range of legal and constitutional issues. D. The importance of checks and balances. The system of checks and balances is fundamental to American democracy, ensuring that no single branch of government becomes too powerful. The Supreme Court plays a critical role in this system by exercising judicial review and providing a check on legislative and executive actions. This role reinforces the court's independence and ensures that government actions adhere to constitutional principles. The interplay between the court, the president, and Congress highlights the importance of maintaining a balanced and effective government. The appointment and confirmation process, as well as the court's role in reviewing laws and executive actions, contribute to the overall stability and accountability of the American political system. The role of public perception. The legitimacy of the Supreme Court is closely tied to public perception and trust. The court's ability to function effectively depends on its perceived impartiality and commitment to upholding constitutional principles. Controversial decisions and public reactions can impact the court's legitimacy, emphasizing the need for transparency and a commitment to legal reasoning. Public engagement and education about the court's role and decisions are crucial for fostering respect and acceptance of its authority. By promoting a better understanding of the court's functions and the principles underlying its decisions, the judiciary can help build public trust and maintain its legitimacy. Looking ahead. As society continues to evolve, the Supreme Court will face new challenges and opportunities in interpreting the Constitution. The court's role in addressing contemporary issues, balancing legal stability with innovation, and maintaining its legitimacy will remain central to its function as the guardian of constitutional principles. Through its decisions and its interactions with the other branches of government, the Supreme Court will continue to shape the future of American law and democracy. In conclusion, the Supreme Court's role in interpreting the Constitution is fundamental to the preservation of American democracy and the protection of individual rights. By navigating the complexities of constitutional interpretation, balancing precedent and innovation, and maintaining its legitimacy, the court contributes to the ongoing evolution of American law and governance.